Kwame had always thought that her relationship with Jaiwin was something special. It wasn't just about the chemistry they shared or the quiet moments of understanding between them, no. It was deeper, a connection forged from the clash of cultures, from different worlds colliding into one love story. Or so she thought. But this Christmas would be the one that shattered that illusion. It was supposed to be perfect. Her first Christmas with Jaiwin's family. An occasion she thought would bring them closer. They had been together for almost 2 years now, and after all the whispers of, "When are you introducing her to the family?" she thought this was it. The moment they would finally be accepted, understood, embraced. What happened next was far from what she expected. The moment Kwame stepped into Jaiwin's luxurious mansion, she felt a pit in her stomach. The warmth of the decorations, the Christmas tree shining brightly in the corner. It was all too cheerful, too perfect. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. Jaiwin's family looked like they had walked straight out of a K-drama, dressed in tailored suits and pearls, with the air of wealth that screamed money and power. And that's when it hit her, Jaiwin's world was not hers. Her family wasn't just rich. They were part of the Korean Mafia, a world that Jaiwin had been born into, and a world Kwame had no idea how to navigate. At first, everything was cordial. They offered her drinks, made polite conversation, and smiled like they were trying to fit in a script. But then the questions started, uncomfortable, probing questions that didn't belong at a Christmas dinner. "So, you're African, huh? Do you dance at parties? What do you sing?" Kwame smiled, but the questions kept coming, one after another, until they felt more like an interrogation. "Does your culture have any real traditions, or is it all just about the beat?" Someone asked, raising an eyebrow as if she were some exotic creature to be studied. Kwame could feel her nerves tighten. This wasn't just curiosity. It was mockery wrapped in politeness. And that's when Jaiwin's father, a towering figure in the Mafia, joined the conversation, asking her to perform a traditional dance. "Go on, show us your culture," he smirked, as if it was a performance for his amusement. Kwame's stomach dropped. The tension in the room thickened. She felt like a specimen under a microscope, a momentary distraction for their entertainment. Jaiwin just laughed, her eyes avoiding Kwame's. She didn't understand why it felt wrong. Maybe she didn't want to understand. But when the real disrespect came, it came from the kids. Jaiwin's younger cousin, a white boy barely old enough to know better, began hopping around, making African chants, mimicking Kwame's culture. The room erupted in laughter. Her stomach churned, her palms sweating with anger. And there was Jaiwin, the woman Kwame loved, sitting there laughing along with her family, as if everything was just a big joke. That was the breaking point. Kwame stood up, her chair scraping violently against the floor. The laughter stopped, and suddenly, the air was thick with tension. "Enough," she shouted, her voice shaking with fury. "I'm not your dancing monkey, and you need to respect my culture." Jaiwin froze, her face turning pale as she stared at Kwame. But she didn't speak up. She didn't defend her. Kwame turned to Jaiwin, her eyes burning with frustration. "This isn't a joke, Jaiwin. This is my life. My identity. And you're just sitting here laughing with them like it's nothing." But Jaiwin, in that moment, only whispered, "They're just kidding around, Kwame." That was the final straw. Kwame felt her heart break into 1,000 pieces. She had walked into that house with high hopes, only to be humiliated and betrayed. Jaiwin, the woman she loved, hadn't defended her. She hadn't stood by her side when it mattered. And that realization hit Kwame like a slap to the face. In a whirlwind of emotion, Kwame grabbed her things, storming out of the room. She was done. But what happened next made it all worse. She realized Jaiwin had driven them there, and now she was stranded without a way to get home. No phone, no car, no ride. Just a broken heart and an angry stomach. Kwame swallowed her pride, walked back into the house, and asked for help from Jaiwin's grandmother. Jaiwin's grandmother, a woman who had seen it all, was furious. She didn't just sit idly by, she was one of the few people in the house who understood the gravity of what had just happened. "Get your things and go," she told Kwame. "You deserve better than this." It wasn't much, but it was something. However, Jaiwon's family didn't get it. They didn't understand why Kwame was so upset. And Jaiwon? She still sat there, silent. Too silent. But the worst was still to come. Kwame knew the next step would be difficult. Leaving Jaiwon was inevitable. But was she really ready to walk away from the woman she thought she could build a future with? Was this how it was going to end? Over a Christmas dinner? As Kwame packed her things, Jaiwon's brother-in-law, the one person who understood Kwame's pain, came to her side. "I'll give you a ride," he offered. He had his own issues with Jaiwon's family, and he knew how hard it was for Kwame to be in that room. Was Kwame making the right decision? The drive to her apartment would become the moment where Kwame's entire world would shift. Because sometimes, it's not just the people you love who hurt you, it's the ones you thought you could trust. But in the end, Kwame was determined to take control of her own destiny. Kwame was done with Jaiwon's family, but could she ever forgive Jaiwon? Would they ever be able to rebuild what they had, or had the betrayal gone too deep? Stay tuned for what happens next. Kwame's story is just beginning, and you won't believe what's coming next. Hit that subscribe button, because this emotional journey is only going to get more intense. The truth about Jaiwon's family will come out, and Kwame's life will change forever. Don't miss it. The drive home was painfully silent. Kwame sat in the passenger seat of Jaehyun's truck, her mind spinning with thoughts she couldn't quite process. Her heart still pounded, a mixture of anger and disbelief swirling inside her. She had always prided herself on being strong, but this was different. How could Jaiwon not stand up for her? Jaiwon, the woman who had said she loved her, who had promised they would face everything together, why had she stayed silent? It wasn't just the fact that her family had been disrespectful. It was the complete absence of support from the one person who should have had her back. Kwame tried to push away the hurt, but it was impossible. She had gone into that dinner with an open heart, ready to bond with the woman she loved, ready to be part of something bigger than herself. But instead, she felt like a stranger in their world, someone who didn't belong. And it wasn't just the family's actions that stung. It was the coldness of Jaiwon's inaction. She hadn't defended her. She hadn't even acknowledged the hurt Kwame was feeling. All she did was sit there, laughing along, like the entire thing was a joke. Kwame's phone buzzed in her pocket. She reluctantly pulled it out, hoping for something, anything that might help her make sense of this. The screen lit up with messages, first from Jaiwon, then from some mutual friends, and a few family members. The texts were a mix of confusion, anger, and, worst of all, criticism. The messages from her friends made her stomach twist. Why'd you break up with her in front of her family? That was way out of line. You can't just leave like that, Kwame. You're better than this. But it was Jaiwon's message that hit the hardest. She apologized for the situation, but there was no acknowledgement of her failure to stand up for Kwame, no real understanding of what had transpired. Kwame couldn't wrap her head around it. Jaiwon had never been this cold. She had always admired how strong Jaiwon was, how she carried herself with confidence, how she made Kwame feel like she was part of something. But now, in the most critical moment, she had turned into a stranger. How could Jaiwon not see the hurt? How could she sit there, laughing with her family while they mocked Kwame's culture? It wasn't just a mistake, it was a betrayal. Jaiwon's silence spoke volumes. She hadn't been an ally. She hadn't been the partner Kwame thought she was. Kwame stared out the truck window, her heart heavy. She wasn't mad at the family anymore, she was mad at herself. She had given so much to this relationship, so much of herself, and now she was left wondering, was it ever real? Or had Jaiwon only been playing at love all along? Just when Kwame thought she couldn't feel more alone, there was a flicker of something good. Jaiwon's grandmother, the matriarch of the family, had seen everything unfold. And while the rest of Jaiwon's family had remained ignorant or dismissive, Jaiwon's grandmother had stepped up. In a house full of people who didn't understand, she was the only one who had the courage to speak up. "I won't stand by and watch them mock your culture," the grandmother had said, her voice steady and firm. "Kwame, you deserve better than this. I see you." Kwame felt the tears well up, but she swallowed them down. It wasn't just the fact that Jaiwan's grandmother had defended her, it was the recognition. Someone finally saw her. Someone finally understood. It felt like a lifeline in the middle of a storm. But as much as she appreciated it, the pain from Jaiwan's silence remained. Kwame couldn't wait any longer. She had to speak to Jaiwan. She couldn't let this go. There was too much at stake. Too much broken trust. She walked into the bedroom, her heart pounding in her chest. Jaiwan was sitting on the bed, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. She had been texting Kwame nonstop since she left, trying to apologize, but the words didn't feel real. Kwame stood there for a moment, staring at her, trying to find the right words. But nothing felt right. Nothing felt real anymore. "Why didn't you stand up for me?" Kwame's voice cracked as she asked the question. "You laughed along with them. You let them make a mockery of my culture. I needed you, Jaiwan. And you just sat there." Jaiwan opened her mouth to speak, but the words faltered. I didn't know what to do," she whispered, her voice small. Kwame shook her head. "You didn't know what to do? You're the one person who should have known. You should have defended me, Jaiwan." The silence between them was deafening. Jaiwan's eyes filled with tears, but they didn't comfort Kwame anymore. They felt like a hollow apology, one that couldn't fix the pain. Kwame grabbed her bag, the weight of everything pressing down on her chest. She looked at Jaiwan one last time, her heart breaking. "I'm leaving. I can't do this anymore." Jaiwan's face twisted with emotion. "Kwame, please don't go. We can work through this." But Kwame knew it was over. It wasn't just about this one moment. It was about the lack of trust, the lack of respect, and the disconnection between them. With one final look, Kwame walked out the door, her heart shattering with each step. The world outside seemed so quiet, so still, compared to the chaos inside her. Would this be the end of everything she had built with Jaiwan? Kwame had left. But the pain was far from over. What happens when love fades and betrayal cuts deep? Can she ever go back, or is this the end of everything she thought she knew about Jaiwan? You're not going to want to miss what happens next. Kwame's journey is only beginning. And the truth about Jaiwan's family is about to come out in ways you can't imagine. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned, because the next chapter is about to take everything to a whole new level. Kwame walked out of the house with no particular destination in mind, just away. The door slammed shut behind her, and for the first time in what felt like hours, she could breathe. The cold winter air hit her face, the chill somehow feeling more comforting than the warmth of Jaiwan's family had moments before. Her heart pounded, but she kept walking. She had been part of Jaiwan's world for over a year, and yet, here she was alone, standing in the cold, uncertain of what came next. Kwame had always prided herself on knowing what to do in tough situations, but this was different. She had never been in a situation like this before. As she walked down the long driveway, her thoughts were interrupted by a voice. It was Jaiwan's grandmother, the same woman who had stood up for her in the face of the family's disrespect. "Kwame, wait," the old woman called softly, her frail voice carrying in the quiet night. Kwame turned around, her emotions too raw to hide. "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep the sharpness out of her tone. The grandmother didn't deserve her anger. "I know you're angry," she said, stepping closer. "And you should be. But before you leave, let me tell you something." Kwame stood still, her arms crossed against the biting wind, waiting for the woman to continue. "Family can be a heavy burden," the grandmother said, her eyes filled with a wisdom Kwame couldn't ignore. "But respect is a foundation you should never let anyone take away. I know this family, they will never truly understand your pain. But that doesn't mean you should carry it alone. Know your worth. And when you stand up for what you believe in, never apologize for it." Kwame swallowed hard, the lump in her throat making it hard to speak. "I don't know what to do anymore," she whispered. "I'm so lost." The grandmother reached out, placing a hand on Kwame's shoulder. "You're not lost, my dear. You're just finding your way. Trust that this pain will guide you to something better. Don't let them take your peace." Kwame nodded silently, unable to say anything more. With that, She turned and walked away, her heart heavier but somehow more determined. She had to leave. As Kwame walked down the street, the world around her felt like it was spinning in slow motion. The further she got from Jaiwan's house, the heavier her heart became. She had never felt this lost before. Her mind kept replaying the events. The mocking questions, Jaiwan's silence, the laughter from her family as if Kwame was just a prop for their amusement. How could Jaiwan not stand up for her? Was she really the person Kwame thought she was? Kwame's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp pain in her chest. It felt like the weight of everything had just slammed into her all at once. She had spent so much time trying to fit into Jaiwan's world, so much time trying to be understood, only to be humiliated in front of her family. Kwame stopped walking, leaning against a nearby street lamp for support. She closed her eyes, trying to gather herself, but the memories kept flooding back. She had thought they had something real. But what was real anymore? Kwame's phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of her thoughts. She glanced at the screen. It was a text from Jaiwan. She couldn't read it. Not now. Just as she was about to put her phone away, a voice broke through the silence. Kwame. She turned around, surprised to see Jae-hyun, Jaiwan's brother-in-law, standing a few feet behind her. I thought you left with your stuff, he said, his voice full of concern. I did, Kwame replied softly, trying to force a smile. I needed some air. Jae-hyun took a few steps toward her, his gaze sympathetic. Can I offer you a ride home? Kwame hesitated. She didn't want to be around anyone right now, but she didn't want to be alone either. Sure, she said after a moment. They both climbed into Jae-hyun's car. As he drove, the quiet was comforting, but it wasn't long before Jae-hyun spoke up. I know what you're going through, Kwame, he said, his voice calm but heavy with unspoken understanding. Kwame turned to him, surprised. You do? Jae-hyun nodded. I've been in this family long enough to know how they operate. They don't mean to hurt you, but they're blind to their own privilege. It's hard to find a way in, especially when it's your own family who doesn't see you. Kwame felt a small weight lift off her shoulders. Jae-hyun understood. He wasn't part of the family by blood, but he had seen enough of their disrespect to know how painful it was to be a part of it. You're not alone, Jae-hyun continued, his voice sincere. I've had my own battles here, but I've learned to stand my ground. You have to do the same. Kwame looked at him, seeing the depth of his pain and the resilience in his eyes. He had been through his own struggles, but he had survived. And now, here he was, offering her a piece of hope. The car ride was quiet for a few moments as Jae-hyun focused on the road. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was reflective. I know this isn't easy, Jae-hyun finally said, breaking the silence. Being in an interracial relationship with this family? It's hard. I get it. Kwame turned to him, her heart heavy with emotions she didn't know how to express. It's just, I don't know how to feel anymore. I thought this was the life I was building, but now I'm not sure who Jaiwan is. Who I am in this world. Jae-hyun nodded, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. I know. It's like you're torn between two worlds, and neither one truly accepts you. But the truth is they never will, not until they're ready to change. And it's not on you to change them. Kwame's eyes filled with tears, but she fought them back. I don't know if I can do this anymore. Jae-hyun didn't answer right away, but when he did, his words were simple and cutting. Sometimes, walking away is the only way forward. It's the only way you'll find peace. Kwame sat in silence, letting his words sink in. She didn't have the answers, but she had to make a choice. As the night grew darker, Kwame felt the weight of Jae-hyun's words settle on her heart. She had been so focused on the hurt, on the betrayal, that she had forgotten about herself. She had to take control of her own future. No one else could do that for her. Jae-hyun, seeing the shift in Kwame's energy, gave her a small, encouraging smile. I know it's not easy, but you're stronger than you think. Kwame smiled back. It wasn't much, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't alone. Jae-hyun's words echoed in her mind as he pulled up to her apartment. Take it one step at a time. And remember, you are the only one who decides your worth. Kwame stepped out of the car, a small glimmer of hope in her chest. It wasn't over. She would find her way. Kwame had left Jaiwon's world behind, but what would she find in her own? Would the future be as painful as the past, or would she finally find her own peace? The road ahead for Kwame is uncertain, but the fight for her happiness is just beginning. Hit subscribe now, because you don't want to miss the next chapter in Kwame's journey. Will she find healing, or is this just the beginning of her struggles? Stay tuned. The night was quiet, the only sound in Kwame's apartment the hum of the refrigerator. But her mind? Her mind was anything but quiet. Her phone buzzed. It was Jaiwon. Kwame's heart sank as she looked at the message preview. "I'm so sorry about everything." The words on the screen blurred as Kwame's hands shook. She didn't want to read it. Not now. Not after everything. But she couldn't stop herself. She opened the message. Jaiwon apologized. Said she didn't mean for things to escalate like that. She expressed regret for how things went down, but her words were too hollow. There was no real acknowledgement of her failure to stand up for Kwame. Instead, there were excuses. Jaiwon kept defending her family, explaining that they didn't mean it like that. "This family is everything to me," Jaiwon wrote. "I love you, but it's hard when I'm caught between you and them." Kwame let out a bitter laugh, the kind that didn't feel like laughing at all. She couldn't believe what she was reading. Did Jaiwon not get it? Did she really think that "I love you" could erase what happened? Jaiwon had betrayed her. She had sat there and laughed while her family mocked Kwame's culture, and now, in this text, she expected everything to be fixed with words? Kwame slammed the phone down on the table, her chest tight with frustration. The apology felt empty. The more she read it, the more she realized Jaiwon hadn't truly taken responsibility for what she had done. But it didn't stop there. Jaiwon's apology wasn't the only thing that stung. As the day went on, Kwame started receiving messages from their mutual friends. The first message came from a friend she'd known since high school. "I heard you made a scene at Jaiwon's family dinner. Why did you go so far, Kwame?" Then another text came in. "Jaiwon said you totally overreacted." "That's not how it happened, is it?" Kwame felt the ground shift beneath her. What did Jaiwon say? Her heart sank further as she learned the truth. Jaiwon had told their friends a completely different version of the events. She had exaggerated, making it seem like Kwame had been overly sensitive and had caused the drama. Kwame couldn't breathe. She felt like she was suffocating under the weight of this betrayal. She wasn't some drama queen. She wasn't crazy. What had happened was real, and the more Jaiwon tried to twist the truth, the more it hurt. Kwame's mind was a whirlwind. Jaiwon's actions were playing over and over in her head, and each time, the feeling of betrayal became more intense. She had publicly humiliated Kwame in front of her family, and now she was lying about it? Kwame felt a rage bubbling up from deep inside her. This wasn't just about the family anymore. This was about Jaiwon. Her silence. Her lies. Kwame stared at her phone screen in disbelief. How could Jaiwon do this to her? She had trusted her, loved her, and Jaiwon had let her down. Jaiwon didn't defend me. She didn't even see what was wrong. Kwame's fists clenched as her anger grew, burning inside her like a wildfire. "I'm not crazy," she muttered to herself, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm not crazy." The room seemed to close in on her. She paced back and forth, trying to control the storm that raged inside. How dare she lie about me? How dare she try to make me look like the villain? Kwame's phone buzzed again. She almost didn't want to read it. But she couldn't stop herself. It was a message from Jaiwon's brother-in-law, Jaehyun. "I don't know what's going on with you and Jaiwon, but if you need someone to talk to, I'm here." Kwame sighed deeply. She felt like she was drowning. The lies, the manipulation, it was all too much. She needed to talk, but what was there to say? Jaiwon had lied. She'd twisted the truth, painted herself as the victim, and now she was expecting Kwame to fix everything. Kwame couldn't fix this. She didn't need to. Jaiwon had shown her who she really was. And that was something Kwame would never forget. Kwame stood by the window, staring out at the city lights flickering below. Her heart felt heavy, but her mind was clear. She had made the right decision. She had to walk away. She had to leave the woman she loved. Kwame had always believed in love. She had always believed in fighting for it and making things work, no matter the odds. But this was different. This wasn't love. It couldn't be. Kwame's hands shook as she picked up the phone again, scrolling through the messages from Jaiwon. She didn't know why she kept reading them. Maybe part of her was still searching for an apology that was real. Maybe she was still holding out hope that Jaiwon would finally get it. But every message she read made her angrier. How could Jaiwon betray her like this? How could she let her family make a fool of Kwame and then lie about it? The truth was clear. Jaiwon didn't care enough to stand by her. She didn't see Kwame as an equal, she saw her as someone to keep in the background while her family got to decide her worth. Kwame set the phone down, the weight of the decision finally sinking in. She wasn't weak for leaving. She wasn't giving up on love. She was saving herself. This wasn't about pride. It was about dignity. Kwame would never let anyone treat her like that again. And as much as it hurt, this was the end. Kwame had made the hardest decision of her life, but was she ready to face the aftermath? Could she ever forgive Jaiwon, or was this a pain that would haunt her forever? Kwame's journey is only beginning, but the hardest part might still be ahead. Can she heal from this betrayal, or will Jaiwon's lies destroy her for good? Subscribe now, because the truth is about to get even more complicated. You won't want to miss what happens next. Kwame sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through her phone as the weight of the breakup still pressed heavily on her chest. The screen was flooded with messages from friends, some expressing their confusion and concern, others outright questioning her decision. Why'd you break up with her, Kwame? Was it really that bad? I know Jaiwon's family isn't perfect, but maybe you overreacted a bit, don't you think? Kwame ran a hand through her hair, the frustration welling up again. She knew the breakup wasn't easy for her friends to understand. Not everyone could see the whole picture. They didn't know what it felt like to be ridiculed in front of a family, to have your identity mocked, and have the one person who should stand by you remain silent. She shook her head. No one could fully understand. Jaiwon's family wasn't just a group of people to Kwame. They represented the deeper struggles of culture, identity, and acceptance. For her, it wasn't just about a bad dinner or a momentary lapse of judgment. It was a breach of trust, a wound that went far beyond anything she could explain in a simple text message. Kwame was questioning herself. Had she overreacted? Was it too much? But deep down, she knew it wasn't. The hurt she felt was real, and walking away was the only way to protect herself. The truth was, some people would just never get it. And that was okay. She had to stand firm. She had to keep moving forward, even if it meant doing it alone. Just as Kwame was lost in her thoughts, her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Jaehyun, Jaiwon's brother-in-law. You okay? I know what you're going through. Don't let them make you feel small. Kwame smiled slightly at the text. Jaehyun had been the one person who didn't make her feel like a circus act during that dreadful dinner. When everyone else had been either indifferent or outright disrespectful, he had been the only one who understood the depth of the situation. It wasn't just the fact that Jaehyun had stood up for her in the midst of all the chaos. It was the quiet support he had offered after the fact, when he had noticed her pain but didn't push. He had given her space, but he also made sure she knew she wasn't alone. Kwame hit the reply button. Thank you, Jaehyun. I don't know what to think anymore. I feel like I lost everything. You didn't lose everything, he replied almost instantly. What you lost wasn't worth keeping. It's their problem, not yours. Stick to your principles. Don't apologize for feeling hurt. I get it, trust me. For the first time in days, Kwame felt a flicker of relief. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't overreacting. Jaehyun, someone who had been on the outside looking in, saw it too. The disrespect wasn't just something she had imagined. It was real. And now she was beginning to realize she deserved better. The next day, Kwame sat in the small coffee shop she had frequented for the past year, staring at the untouched cup of coffee in front of her. She was exhausted, emotionally drained. The breakup with Jaiwon wasn't just a break in a relationship, it was the breaking of a dream. She had believed in what they had built, in the future they could create. She had imagined them growing old together, sharing traditions, and creating new memories. But now, all of that felt like a distant dream. What was left was the reality of betrayal. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from one of their mutual friends, asking her if she was okay. Kwame stared at the screen, the familiar name almost mocking her. How could everything feel so wrong when Jaiwon hadn't even acknowledged the severity of what had happened? Kwame's chest tightened as the reality hit her again. Jaiwon hadn't just failed her in that moment. She had failed her in the most fundamental way possible. She hadn't cared enough to defend her when it mattered most. "You should have stood up for me, Jaiwon," Kwame whispered to herself, feeling the weight of the words she couldn't speak to Jaiwon's face. She had stood up for their love, but Jaiwon had not. Kwame blinked away the tears that threatened to fall. She wasn't crying because of the loss of the relationship anymore. She was crying because of the betrayal. And it hurt more than she could ever describe. The messages kept coming in, flooding her phone with opinions, concerns, and advice. Some friends agreed with Kwame's decision, telling her that she had every right to walk away. But there were others, friends she had trusted, people she had considered family, who criticized her, saying things like, "Maybe we're too hard on Jaiwon. She's not perfect, but she loves you. You shouldn't have made such a scene in front of her family. It's Christmas." Each message stung, but the ones from Jaiwon's friends hurt the most. It felt like she was being gaslit all over again, as if she was the one in the wrong. Kwame slammed her phone down on the table in frustration, her fingers trembling. She wasn't looking for validation anymore. She wasn't asking for anyone to tell her what she wanted to hear. She just needed people to understand. Her frustration grew, and she found herself texting a few close friends who had always had her back. It wasn't about a scene. It was about respect. If she had defended me, this wouldn't have happened. But she didn't, and I can't keep pretending everything's okay. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Jaiwon. But Kwame didn't open it. She couldn't. Not now. She already knew what it would say. Excuses. The truth was, Kwame had never truly been a part of Jaiwon's family. Sure, she had tried so hard to fit in, but there were walls that no amount of love could break. Jaiwon's family didn't accept her, not fully. They tolerated her because Jaiwon loved her, but the truth was clear. They saw her as different, and they never made the effort to understand. It wasn't just the dinner, it was everything leading up to it. From the subtle, passive-aggressive remarks to the blatant disrespect. They never really made Kwame feel like she belonged. And now, she didn't care anymore. She was done trying to fit into a world that didn't accept her. Kwame knew that it was time to let go, even if it hurt more than she ever imagined. She had learned the hard way, you can't force people to respect you, no matter how much you love them. And maybe it was time for her to start respecting herself. Kwame had made her decision, but was the pain of walking away worth it? Will she ever find peace, or will the scars of betrayal haunt her forever? Kwame's journey is just beginning, and the hardest part is still ahead. Can she rebuild her life after this betrayal? Will she find healing or continue to fight the ghosts of her past? Subscribe now and stay with her every step of the way. This story is far from over, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Kwame sat on the couch, her eyes glued to the screen of her phone as it buzzed with another notification. It was from Jaiwon's grandmother, who had reached out again. Jaiwon's grandmother had been the only one who truly saw the weight of the situation. The only one who had defended Kwame in the face of the disrespect from the rest of the family. And, despite everything, she hadn't given up on her. The message was short, but its words felt heavy. "I'm so sorry for what happened, Kwame. The family's reaction was not fair to you. Jaiwon hasn't fully realized the damage she's done. I'm disappointed, but I'll always stand by you." Kwame stared at the message, her chest tightening with a mixture of sadness and relief. Her grandmother still supported her, even if her own granddaughter hadn't. "I see you, Kwame," the grandmother had written. "You did the right thing." But what did it really mean now? Jaiwon's grandmother's support meant something, but it couldn't undo what had happened. Could Kwame forgive Jaiwon for her silence and betrayal? The truth was, she didn't know anymore. What Jaiwon had allowed to happen, the way she had treated her, it was unforgivable. And no apology could fix that. Just as Kwame finished reading the message from the grandmother, another text popped up from Jaiwon. Kwame, I can't stop thinking about what happened. I'm so sorry for not standing up for you. I didn't realize how wrong it was until now. Please understand that I didn't mean for this to hurt you. Kwame threw her phone on the couch, a sharp exhale escaping her lips. Jaiwon was sorry. Again. It felt too little, too late. The damage was done, and no amount of words could erase the hurt. Jaiwon's apology was hollow. Kwame had heard it too many times to believe it now. Please understand, Jaiwon's words echoed in her mind. Understand what? That Jaiwon had allowed her to be humiliated and never once came to her defense? No, Kwame didn't understand. And she didn't think she ever would. Kwame leaned back against the couch, her thoughts a storm. She had wanted this relationship to work so badly. She had hoped that with time, Jaiwon would see her for who she was. But all she saw now was the truth. Jaiwon's priorities had never been aligned with hers. And no apology, no matter how heartfelt, would change that. Kwame's heart felt heavy, like a weight she couldn't carry anymore. As much as it hurt, she knew the truth now. There was no going back. She had tried. She had tried to make it work, to fit into a world that wasn't hers, to love someone who didn't understand her. But the pain of being betrayed, of being mocked in front of people who were supposed to love and respect her, that was too much to ignore. There was no more pretending. No more hope. Her mind wandered back to the Christmas dinner. The laughter, the awkward questions, Jaiwon's silence. And then the sting of Jaiwon's continued failure to apologize properly. Kwame took a deep breath and closed her eyes. It was over. As much as it tore at her soul to leave someone she had cared for deeply, the damage done couldn't be repaired. She didn't deserve to be treated like that, and she couldn't keep chasing someone who wasn't willing to fight for her. It was time to finally close this chapter, no matter how painful it was. The next day, Kwame found herself sitting across from her therapist, the familiar office providing a sense of calm amidst the storm inside her. I'm really struggling with this, Kwame said, her voice quiet but laced with raw emotion. I know the breakup was necessary, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm missing something. Like I should have fought harder for this relationship. Her therapist, a calm and empathetic woman, nodded understandingly. Kwame, sometimes the hardest part of breaking up isn't leaving. It's letting go of the idea of what you thought the relationship could be. Kwame wiped at the corner of her eyes, her emotions still raw. I wanted so badly for this to work. I thought we could overcome the cultural differences. But now I just feel like I wasted so much time. Her therapist leaned forward, her voice steady and comforting. Kwame, you didn't waste your time. You were loving and invested. But sometimes, when someone isn't willing to meet us halfway, we have to choose ourselves. You did that. Kwame nodded slowly, letting the weight of the therapist's words settle in. It wasn't easy. It wasn't something she wanted to hear. But deep down, she knew it was the truth. She couldn't keep fighting for a love that wasn't returning the effort. The silence between them felt comfortable for the first time in days. As Kwame walked out of the therapist's office, she felt a strange sense of clarity. The path ahead wasn't easy, but it was hers to walk. She didn't need Jaiwon. She didn't need the validation of her friends. She needed to be true to herself, and that meant moving on. Kwame had loved deeply, but now it was time to love herself first. It was time to heal. Time to find peace in the silence, to let go of the guilt she had carried around for so long. She wasn't going to let the past define her anymore. She would rebuild. And in time, she would find someone who would see her worth and fight for it, just as she had done. For now, though, she would take it one day at a time, walking into the future with her head held high, ready to embrace the life that was waiting for her. But as she stepped out into the world, a question still lingered in her mind. Would Jaiwon ever truly understand the pain she had caused? And could she ever find the strength to forgive? Kwame had made the hardest decision of her life, but now she had to face the consequences. Was she strong enough to move forward, or was her heart still chained to the past? Kwame's journey is just beginning, but is she ready to face the future? Will she ever truly heal? Or will the scars of the past always haunt her? Hit subscribe and stay with her as she navigates this new chapter. You won't want to miss how this story unfolds. Kwame stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. The person she saw was someone she barely recognized, a version of herself that had been through hell, but was still standing. Still here. The days following the breakup had been a blur. She had tried to numb the pain with distractions, but deep down, she knew the truth. She needed to heal. And that meant taking a long, hard look at herself and asking, what now? She had spent so long pouring her energy into Jaiwon, into the relationship, that she had forgotten about the most important person in her life, herself. Kwame had lost sight of her own needs, her own desires, and her boundaries. It wasn't just Jaiwon who needed to change, it was Kwame who had to evolve. She had to stop accepting less than she deserved. She had to start respecting herself. And so, she started small. Going for walks in the morning, cooking meals that nourished her, making time for the things she loved. She had always been someone who cared deeply for others, but now it was time to turn that care inward. She learned to appreciate the silence, the space to breathe, and the strength that came from standing up for herself, even when it meant walking away from someone she loved. Kwame wasn't healed yet, but she was getting there. And that was enough for now. As the calendar flipped over to the new year, Kwame sat on her couch, the faint glow of the TV casting a soft light in the room. She had spent the last few days reflecting on the past year, on the heartbreak, the pain, the lessons learned, and she was ready for something new. Something better. She wrote her resolution down in her journal, her pen moving across the page with purpose. This year, I choose to love myself. I will set boundaries and respect them. I will never again allow myself to be disrespected. I will stand up for what I deserve. It wasn't a grand resolution. It wasn't about changing the world or becoming someone else. It was about reclaiming her life. Reclaiming her happiness. Kwame's heart felt lighter as she closed the journal, a sense of peace settling over her. She was done looking back. She was ready to face the future head-on, with a heart open to whatever came next, whether it was love, growth, or just living. Later that evening, her phone buzzed again. She picked it up and saw a text from Jaehyun. "How are you doing, Kwame? I just wanted to check in. I know it's been tough." Kwame smiled softly, grateful for the message. Jaehyun had been one of the few constants in her life throughout all the chaos. Unlike the rest of Jaiwon's family, he had always treated her with respect and kindness. He had seen her pain and stood by her without hesitation. She quickly typed a reply, "I'm getting there. Thanks for checking in. It means a lot." A few seconds later, his response came, "You've got this. I know you're strong. Just remember, I'm here if you need anything." His words were simple, but they were exactly what Kwame needed to hear. She wasn't alone. Even if she had to rebuild her life from scratch, she had people who cared about her. Jaehyun's continued support meant more to Kwame than he would ever know. He didn't just see her as a victim of circumstance. He saw her strength. And that made all the difference. As the days passed, Kwame began to visualize a future that didn't revolve around Jaiwon, her family, or the toxic patterns she had been caught in. She could see herself in a career she loved, with friends who respected her, and maybe, one day, a relationship with someone who would treat her as an equal. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt hopeful. The past was painful, but it had taught her valuable lessons. She had learned the importance of boundaries, of self-respect, of knowing her worth. Kwame wasn't just moving on from Jaiwon, she was moving toward something better. Toward a life where her happiness was in her own hands, and not dictated by someone else's mistakes. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but it was hers to walk. Kwame stood outside in the crisp morning air, feeling the cool wind against her skin. She took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill her lungs. It was like she was taking in the world anew, with a clearer perspective. "I choose me," she whispered to herself, the words almost a mantra. She had spent too much time trying to fit into places where she didn't belong. Now, it was time to find her own path. It wasn't about forgetting Jaiwon or erasing the pain of the past. It was about moving forward, not because the past didn't matter, but because she mattered more. Kwame smiled to herself, a flicker of excitement rising in her chest. The future was waiting, and she was finally ready to embrace it. As she walked down the street, her head held high, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. She had taken the first step toward healing, and that made all the difference. But even as she moved forward, a part of her wondered, would Jaiwon ever really understand what she had done? And could Kwame truly forgive her for it? Only time would tell. Kwame had made the decision to heal, but could she really leave the past behind? What happens when the person who hurt you tries to come back into your life? Kwame has taken her first steps toward healing, but the road ahead is still uncertain. Can she truly forgive, or will the scars of the past keep her from moving forward? Hit subscribe now to follow Kwame's journey as she navigates the twists and turns of life, love, and healing. The hardest part may be behind her, but the future is still full of surprises. You won't want to miss what happens next.